Next role is really to introduce my wife, Charlotte, who has the misfortune to have to put up with my idiosyncrasies, and she's so far past 10 out of 10, and I'm not going to go into her background, but we had this very wonderful trip to Iran early last year, and a wee bit of background. We were introduced to Harry McQuillan, who Charlotte will talk a little bit about later, through a friend in the Hawke's Bay. Harry is a retired engineer, cum geologist, who spent 25 years in Iran, originally working for Shell, and then subsequently at Shiraz University, lecturing on various geological matters. He has a wealth of knowledge on Iranian history, geological background, and its people. So this trip was no simple sightseeing tour. It was a fascinating mixture of that, plus a dialogue that involved historical references, religious studies, geological features, and people analysis. Apart from Harry and his wife, who was a PA to the Shah's sister 25 odd years ago, our Iranian guide Layla gave us local flavour and a personal insight into Iranian life. Now I'm going to leave it at that and pass you over to Charlotte, who's far more erudite and loquacious than I am, and she's going to give you a blow-by-blow description and a few observations on Iranian life. Charlotte.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, or should I say salam to you all. Now I'm just going to move from the microphone briefly.
Can you hear me at the back?
Yes.
Good. Let's look at Iran's bedfellows in terms of neighbours. We have Afghanistan here, Turkmenistan up the top, the Caspian Sea, Azerbaijan, squashed in the middle, Armenia, and then Azerbaijan again. I think I've got that right, Mr. President. And then the crestfallen Iraq. So Iran has some interesting neighbours, most of which, other than Turkmenistan and Azerbaijan, at war. Oh, and Pakistan, sorry, is down here as well. That borders Iran. So trouble, big trouble. Sort of a little bit of trouble there, but not that much at this time.
So, it is a pleasure to speak to you today about a country for many of us is a bit of a mystery. Today we will travel together through our 3 weeks in Iran, which was a journey of 5,000 kilometres, and if there is time for questions, which I don't think there's going to be sadly today, we could talk about the complex political situation of the country and how this impacts on Persian people. Firstly, some facts that will set the scene in terms of a recent historic timeline. The Pahlavi dynasty ran from 1925 to 1979. This was the reign of the two Shahs, father and then son, both named Mohammad Reza. And Mr. President did a tour of duty for 13 months in Iran, so do correct me if I get something wrong. Good sir. Thank you. In 1941, the son succeeded his father and was very inclined towards doing business with the West and adopt Western ways. So, out with the chador, in with the miniskirt. Alcohol was permitted and oil deals were done with the USA. The rich got richer and the traditional Islamic sector of the population got more agitated as it was seen as an insult to Allah. 1978, there was genuine unrest amongst the people who were divided as rumblings of the Ayatollah returning became more and more of a reality. January 1979, there were angry mobs in the streets, foreigners told to go home, and by February the revolution was sealed with the Ayatollah Ruhollah Khamenei taking control. Iran went from absolute freedom into lockdown. Excuse me. Iran is Persian, not Arab. They do not like to be confused as such. The country is 85% Shiite, and that's quite important. The population is 80 million strong, 70% are under the age of 40, and 60% of students at university are female. Their education system is excellent, as it is in their culture going back to ancient times. The young are beautifully manicured and dressed. The males wear their Turkish jeans and crisp haircuts and groovy dark glasses, and the young women wear their hijabs, the headscarf, as far back as possible on their heads there, with beautiful makeup and big hair and the allowed knee-length coat rather than the full-length chador. The country is totally self-supporting with vast arable land, growing food, plenty of water and lots of oil. The Zagros Mountains are a natural barrier to Iraq. Let's see if I can do this. The Zagros run down there. That was a bit wobbly, sorry chaps. Where am I? I've lost my place. The Alborz Mountains are up in the north, which are a barrier to the southern states of Russia, and the vast uncompromising deserts to the right of Iran are a natural border to Afghanistan. Now for our journey. We were beside ourselves with excitement that we were going to this country as a family. Approaches to Tehran as we started our descent was full of anticipation as the Emirate hostess asked all women passengers to put on the hijab. This is it, we're actually here. So I'll start with Tehran, a city of 15 million people, yes, 15 million people, and a permanent traffic jam, the likes of which we have not seen anywhere in the world on our travels. There is prostitution, a serious drug culture in Tehran, a big black market, and public executions by hanging. We check in at the so-called five-star Laleh hotel, which was utterly a joke. Nothing had been done to this hotel since the fall of the Shah. Internet, occasionally. Worn-out plumbing and noisy corridors, rather like John Cleese's Fawlty Towers. We visited the Shah's Palace, which was an ultra-modern residence, and a few other noteworthy sites, but the surprise was when we visited the Qajar Palace. A large group of schoolgirls, all in their chadors, saw a blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl of similar age, namely our daughter Henrietta, who they proceeded to mob. Out of the blue they appeared, all talking at her at once, wanting to know all about her, and of course multiple selfies were taken. And so it was, for the rest of the trip, wherever we went the same ritual ensued. Now I have to tell you, this ritual was truly a highlight of the trip. This gave us insight into how terribly isolated the Persian people have been since 1979. They are thrilled to have foreigners in their country, desperate to be fine hosts, and for you to see the marvels of their homeland. So the sudden random mobbing had a lovely feel about it and gave us a sense of goodwill from the start. The next day was when the adventure started with our excursion over the Alborz Mountains, heading north to the Caspian Sea. This mountain pass was unlike anything Bob and I had seen in all our travels. Climbing to approximately 11,000 feet, we wended our way for most of the day, witnessing remarkable geological relief. We drove through vertical uplifts and formations which made one feel we were back in the Jurassic Age. Finally down to the Caspian Sea, and a most unremarkable place that was, other than the plethora of litter and derelict vacant mansions from people who had fled back in the day of the fall of the Shah. What was interesting was the fact that it felt very Russian, the people being of Iran, Kurdish, Turkmen and Azerbaijani extraction. This is influenced by the Alborz Mountains, which act as a cultural barrier as well as a geographical one within the country. I'm not turning the page. We then journeyed northwest in the direction of Azerbaijan to a mountain village called Mazulay, where the pathways were along the rooftops of houses to the big bazaar full of craft and authentic tea houses. This was a fascinating place, with what appeared to be a strict Muslim code, all women dressed in traditional black chador. Again, Henrietta got mobbed by young girls. Our next change of direction took us back over the Alborz Mountains via a different pass, heading southwest to the town of Zanjan. As we are checking into our hotel late, a group of young people are walking to the lift, and boy were they dressed to the nines. We're thinking if the police saw them, they would be in trouble. Mini skirts, flowing gowns, great colour, ultra-high heels, seriously full-day makeup and fabulous hair. We discover it's a wedding, and as soon as the mother of the bride got news of Farangi, which is foreigners, in the hotel, we promptly got an invitation to join the celebration. And it would be a slight not to attend. Tired out and looking so plain and ordinary as we did, Henrietta and I walked into the female reception to be greeted by the most glamorous assembly of young and old I have not seen in a long while. These women were having the best time ever, free to dress up and make themselves beautiful, laughing, dragging us onto the dance floor, dancing with one another. It was so wonderfully uninhibited and almost naive in the best possible way. Once again, Henrietta, being young and foreign, got swamped. There's a book out called Mirrors of the Unseen, and I'm going to make a quote. One woman says, as she blows smoke upward in a languid way, "You see, here in Iran, we lead a double life. Understand that, and you will understand everything." That was another unrehearsed moment which made our day in spite of our fatigue. I should add at this point we're seeing antiquities along the way, but to mention them each time would be a bore, so I will be mentioning a couple shortly. On to the town of Hamadan. This destination takes us south on a picturesque route to the ancient town. We arrived to a sea of traditional black chadors in the streets, setting the tone that this was a very conservative town. Hamadan is 6,000 feet above sea level and dates back 1000 BC. We arrive and check into our hotel again quite late, and behold, another wedding. And so it was, once again, looking travel-worn and plain, we are ushered into the wedding reception for a rerun of dancing and so on, but this time a strange addition. Quite a few of the beauties here had their noses all bandaged up, and this is a phenomenon in Iran. It is the new fashion to have nose jobs. So the beautiful Persian noble nose is getting straightened and cut short at the end with all the youth. And it's most particularly sad because they've got such lovely noses, I think. We visited the tomb of Esther, a Jewish orphan who married King Xerxes. And this extraordinary union has meant that the 15,000 Jews that live in Iran, 0.01% of the population, are not persecuted for being Jewish. Whilst in Hamadan, we visited the bazaar and we stood out somewhat, particularly Henrietta, who was wearing a bright rainbow-coloured poncho, which in the sea of black had heads turning. The next day gets interesting for a couple of reasons. A full day's journey due west towards the Iraqi border and the settlements of Bisatun and Tak-e-Bostan. As we drove west, one could feel the changes as we got closer to Iraq. More military presence in the form of machinery and barracks, laden trucks heading for the border with trade, and generally a barren landscape with austere settlements, all of which looked purpose-built for defence. We got as far as 95 miles from the Iraqi border, and a further 90 miles after that, we would have had lunch in Baghdad. I have to say it was a bit thrilling to know we were so close. But there's a reason for lurking in this slightly dodgy area, and that was to visit Bisatun and Tak-e-Bostan, where bas-reliefs depicting Darius the Great with his horses and minions, and the cuneiform inscriptions below, which tell the story of this 2,500-year-old wonder. Set in the most inaccessible part of a massive limestone cleft in vertical rock, Henry Rawlinson from the Great Game fame, which I'm sure some people might know the earlier history of Britain in India and Afghanistan and Persia. He deciphered the cuneiform, hitherto not understood, which was the breakthrough in understanding a large piece in ancient Persian history. Okay, the next day we said head south to Isfahan, and again with huge excitement because this city is the jewel of Iran. Also, we were booked to stay at the beautiful Abasi Caravanserai for 3 nights, and as we already felt like we were on boot camp with the hugely long days of travel, this indeed was our oasis. It lived right up to expectation. The journey from Hamadan to Isfahan is along the ancient Royal Highway, so called because it was part of the old Silk Route, and our caravanserai was once its trading post and watering hole. What a sense of history we felt at the caravanserai, whilst enjoying the refinements of Persian ways in an exquisite setting. Next day we visit the mother of all mosques and bazaars. The ultimate in artisan mosaic tile work is found in Isfahan's huge Imam and Sheikh Lotfollah mosques. These are found surrounding the Imam Square, where the bazaar stretches for hundreds of metres around an enormous inner courtyard. These mosques are works of devotion beyond compare. The tile work is not only very beautiful, telling stories of Islamic religion, but they are mathematically brilliantly put together. Another highlight in Isfahan was promenading at night. We strolled one evening at 11:30 to the Kaju Bridge, built in the Safavid era, which is about 500 years old, with its 33 arches spanning the beautiful Zayende River. What did we come across? We came across old and young alike sitting on this beautifully lit bridge, playing guitars, singing Persian poetry, talking. It was like a party, and it was just euphoric because there was just such peace and calm. It was profound to us because there were no police, no barricades, no sound of breaking glass, and no fighting, because there was no alcohol. It was alcohol-free. It's illegal in Iran, and it had such a different feel. It was amazing. We farewell Isfahan and head further south and into the heart of the Zagros Mountains at an elevation of 8,000 feet. The scenery is mouth-watering. At this height, there is endless rolling plains with wilding Persian oaks and lush crops, with the occasional mob of Qashqai nomads grazing their fat-tailed sheep in the summer highlands. Above us at one point was a 7,000-foot vertical escarpment rising to 15,000 feet. All this in one scenic vista. We are still on the Royal Highway, being part of the old Silk Route. Our destination is the town of Yasuj. I should tell you at this point, we did have many police checks along the way. We had to have the bus stopped in the most extraordinary places that you would think. A shack in the middle of nowhere would have a policeman in it, and it was to check that we weren't more people than we started with or less, because they still got the culture of spies, etc. So we were watched and we were followed and checked on. Next day it's southwards to Shiraz, slowly losing elevation but still in beautiful Persian oak country. We're really in amongst the Zagros Mountains at this point, which is also the same approach towards Persepolis that Alexander the Great took. Shiraz is the home of nightingales, rosewater, and the great Persian poets Sa'di and Hafez. Their mausoleums are placed in beautiful public gardens where you can stroll amongst the cypress trees. The highlight next day was an early morning start to Persepolis, which is just northeast of Shiraz. It was here in Shiraz at our hotel where I felt for the first time that we were in the presence of the secret police, and I won't go into why. I don't think we've got enough time. The highlight next morning was an early start to Persepolis, which is just north of Shiraz. This must be the engineering feat of its time, and even now one boggles at how 2,500 years ago they designed and constructed such a sophisticated creation. The friezes depict storytelling of the time, conquests of kings, and the movement of peoples. The gate of all nations would welcome official delegations from far lands like Egypt, Ethiopia, Libya, with their animals and their slaves to pay homage to the king. It was 330 BC, in 330 BC when Alexander the Great sacked Persepolis and marauded across Central Asia. Pressing on to the city of Yazd, we are still in amongst the Zagros Mountains in the area of Shiraz as we turn northeast, through the central ranges and cross over the active, very active I might say, tectonic plates where the southwest Arabian plate collides with the Persian plate. This is what creates the massive folds of the Zagros, which is spectacular as we wind our way north. Eventually we reach the city of Yazd, which sits on the edge of a great salt desert. It's only May and it's getting really hot. What a fabulously interesting town this is, with narrow alleyways and archways, mud-plastered adobe-style dwellings, all crammed together, and just so very, very old. The expectation of our arrival time at each town or city was clearly an unobtainable goal, so once again we arrive in the evening to our other accommodation treat outside of Isfahan, which was the Dad Hotel, which once was a caravanserai as well. Firstly, Yazd is a home to Zoroastrianism. This religion is still practiced in Yazd. Followers worship fire and until not so long ago didn't bury their dead, but took them up to the Towers of Silence, where at the top of a couple of hills, you'll see some photos, I believe, of these, where they'd place them round the outside. They'd build a wall and they'd place the bodies sitting up round the outside, and they would leave them there and let the buzzards, vultures, do the rest. And they would pick the bones clean, and then they would put the bodies into a pit in the centre of the top of the hill. Secondly, the Persians here and throughout the desert region had a fantastic underground water retriculation system called qanats. Persians are great mathematicians and engineers, and so well evidences this in their hundreds of miles of underground waterways, without which they couldn't have survived in the desert. I now have some notes, because I think I'm getting close, but just to say from Yazd to Tehran, we drove along the edge of a desert, and it was relatively unremarkable back to Tehran, other than we got a massive flat tyre in this 40-seater bus, and the driver Mohammed and Bob were the two that changed it. And that was a massive undertaking.
He was a black belt karate.
Yes.
He did all the work.
It was an enormous wheel like this. Quick notes, food. Persia equals pomegranates, mulberries, walnuts, pistachios, pecans, almonds, rosewater, which is very much used in their desserts, dates and yogurt. They make a lot of stews and their diet is predominantly low fat. We would say the food is good, with the odd sensational dish, but mostly it is very healthy. Picnics, this is important. Everywhere we went, there would be families and people picnicking. It's a national pastime, and down would go the picnic rug, with the samovar on the boil and the food spread out. Persians will picnic anywhere at all, in a park, beside a highway. If one passes a picnic, chances are you will be invited to sit and share with them their offerings, including a turn smoking on a hookah. This was a unique and lovely experience, and indeed happened several times to us. They are a very family-orientated people, and it occurred to me that these wonderful, wonderful people who are squeezed between their Ayatollah and the United States of America have found a way how to forget that they are not free. So, I can stop there. If you would like me to, I have a bit more, but I'm happy to stop, Mr. President.
I would to stop. I've run out of time.
I know, that's what I thought, so I will conclude there. Thank you.
Yeah, good. It's been a great pleasure to thank my wife. Three quick things. Thanks, Charlotte. I call her Polly for doing that. As I said, far more loquacious than I am. Emphasising the hospitality side, they'll stop you in the street, invite you to lunch. They want to talk to you, and we couldn't get over that. Secondly, the religion, according to Layla, this girl that took us around, 40-year-old woman who does tourist stuff, said that she thought approximately 80% of the young people weren't religious. They'd be agnostic or atheist. So the Ayatollah's probably got a little bit of trouble in the next decades or so. And also, we came across at the welcome, who were welcoming us at one of the hotels we went at, the smallest genuine human being in the world. He's a delightful character, under a metre tall, perfectly formed, perfectly brained, but about this high. And of course, probably that he was there to put money in the box at the entrance to the hotel. But it was quite unique seeing this 26-year-old who was very proud of himself as he recently bought an apartment somewhere, which was quite expensive. Anyway, on the strength of that, thank you, and I hope you'll feed me tonight.